If you would like to know a little bit more about how to choose the right career path with conviction, well, then you're going to enjoy this video because I recently sat down with Klaudia Rapala from the U Particle podcast, and she is an artist, a creative, a holistic guide, and we had a conversation about how to find your path, how to go about this process of connecting with your calling, with your vocation. We talked about things like temptation paths, paths that take us off track. We talked about career archetypes. We talked about how some people can go into the corporate landscape and end up having these periods where they just crash and burn and need to stop and heal and come back to themselves and gather knowledge. And I also gave some perspectives on different approaches to actually coming into awareness of what your calling is, and how a lot of the times it's not really about seeking, it's about going internally, going underneath the rubble and connecting in with your soul, which is often hidden from you. It's kind of like your nose, right? So your nose is right there and you can't really see it, but if you pay attention, like cross-eyed, there it is. And we have a conversation about how to connect into your vocation. And so if you are someone that is going through trying to understand what your path is, or maybe you've been trying to figure out what your purpose is for your entire life, then you're really going to enjoy this episode.
Welcome, Joel. Nice to see you. How are you doing
Great to
today?
see you. Yeah, I'm really good. I'm really good. How are you?
Good, awesome. I'm really excited for this conversation. I saw you on Instagram a few times and I was like, wow, I really love what this guy is doing. It's so cool. I love archetypes, I love creativity. So for someone who doesn't know, perhaps hasn't found your page yet, how would encompass, give a short bio or an elevator pitch. It doesn't have to be that short.
Yeah.
How would you introduce people to your work?
Hmm. So I sort of offer an alternative to traditional careers. And the way that I do that is help people to find their vocation in this life. And I typically work with people that are more spiritually inclined, more creatively inclined, people that don't traditionally fit the mold, so to speak, people that don't fit a stereotypical job title, that also feel as though they have something to bring to the world to express, but they can't quite find the avenue of how to do it. Maybe they have multiple different interests, multiple passions, multiple loves, and my role is guiding those people to a path that actually feels deeply aligned in this sort of modern world where we do have to pay the bills. And how can we do that in a way that doesn't feel as though it diminishes our soul? So my work is dominantly pointed at this idea. And I've found that archetypes are one of the best ways to connect with the essence of the work that we're born for. So that's what I do. I share that work on places like Instagram, Substack, YouTube. I have a community that I run full of students that are searching for their path, and also students that know their path but are looking to refine it, looking to do things a bit differently, just are looking for the support they need to do that. So that's sort of the short bio.
Music to my soul, you know. I feel like when you're a creative, when you're an artist, or you live in this world for long enough, and you have multiple passions, multiple things that excite you, when you don't quite fit into the normal models and the normal standards, then you come out into the working world and it's a bit of a shell shock moment of how do I do this? I know in my work it took me quite a long time to actually be able to take all the elements I enjoyed in life, that I enjoyed
Mm,
in work, and be like, okay, I can kind of stick them together. But it was a process. So it's beautiful that you're the person that is, offering the helping hand and saying, hey, you don't have to do it alone. You're not crazy also.
mm.
But I'm
Well, I
curious.
mean, yeah.
Yeah, go for it.
Oh, well, it's an experience that so many different creative people have had, where even if they're supported in their throughout their high school years, they sort of are told by different people like teachers and parents that, hey, you can pursue this path, and they get to university, and then suddenly it's, oh, actually, you can't pursue this path. I'm like, what? You told me that I could, and then all of a sudden have told me that it's not practical enough. Not that many people can get roles in these positions, and they're bombarded with all these different beliefs, and many of them unfortunately turn the corner and pursue something that doesn't quite fit. And so a large majority of people that I work with, I'm reminding them like, hey, this is actually still possible. You
Mm.
can actually go and walk that path. and they sort of know it deep down as well when you remind them. And yeah, that's a big part of my work.
Mm, beautiful. And obviously, I'm guessing it comes from some sort of hero's journey on your part that you first was this something that you first had to go through to discover for yourself all those little nuggets of wisdom and treasures or on the journey? How did you come to this work?
So I've always wanted to know what my purpose was. Annoyingly wanted to know what my purpose was and couldn't quite figure it out. I was in an insurance gig about over half a decade ago, and I was just very frustrated and didn't want to do it and wanted to leave, but didn't know what I wanted to do. And I had a list of different interests that I wanted to pursue, and nothing sort of gave me the answer or the signal or the call to pursue this particular thing. So I got really annoyed. That's how it began. And I started to scroll Reddit pages, go on YouTube, type in how do you find what your vocation is? How do you find what your purpose is, your career? I would be doing personality tests and I watched different TED Talks and nobody gave me the thing. There was lots of interesting information. I definitely gained a lot of self-knowledge, but nobody gave me like that, oh, this is the
Mm,
thing I'm meant to be doing. And so because that frustrated me so much, I went and sort of tried to break it down myself. I ended up unearthing my own career archetype, which is philosopher. And that when I figured that out, that just changed my life. So I ended up leaving the insurance gig, pursuing philosophy full time, and that's what I do. And I just found out that I wanted to help people live meaningful existences. And one of the biggest areas that people were finding a lack of meaning in was their career and their vocation.
mm.
And that spoke to me as well. So it was quite a hero's journey. And I did find that sort of realignment out in the world afterwards, but it began in frustration and annoyance and pain.
Beautiful. Yeah, I love the philosopher that, that infinite search for knowledge that is ever nourishing. For sure I relate to that archetype too. And um, are the archetypes something that come to you naturally, or did they come from a certain body of work or from everything that you've studied, or are you focusing more on the I don't want to say cultural, more like the predominant archetypes in our culture, maybe.
So I remember studying Jung's work a while ago. So Carl Jung, the psychologist, very, very famous, came up with this idea of archetypes. And I remember reading some of his books, and he sort of talks about this prime pattern, this base level image, God image, he'll often call it, and saying that this was this universal structure within human beings, and we can find it cross culturally. And that idea like stood with me. And I remember thinking about this idea of archetypes and then noticing as well that these archetypes can be differentiated based on the circumstances that somebody's in or the environment that they're around or the culture or the era that they're going through. And that intellectually hit a chord with me. It's like, okay, so you can have an archetype like a father, but you can have also a differentiated archetype, which is a good father or a bad father. And we can further personalize those archetypes. We can have a good father that's rich or a good father that's poor or
Hmm.
good or bad father that's rich and bad. And it just goes on and on and on. You continually differentiate these archetypes, which leads to this idea of personalization, or he called it individuation. So you can get to this place where you eventually come at the root archetype, which is your uniqueness or your only pattern that is you. But seeing those archetypes out in the world as well in professions, I was like, oh, okay, so there's also, the lawyer, the doctor, the artist. We see all these different archetypes, but obviously not all artists are the same. There's so many different differentiated versions across the board. And noticing that also led me to intellectually again that, okay, there's different ways of expressing these archetypes. And it seems like the path is figuring out what our own personal differentiated version of this archetype is. And so that sort of led me down the path of it. But then I started to work with somebody else who was, her name Sarah Kay, and she's a mystic, and she started working with archetypes in a different way. And I was working with her, and she started working with them in this like atmospheric place where she would tune you into these different images and frequencies just by leading you through these meditations. And that was a secondary layer of archetypal work that I'd done. So I had like this intellectual side, but it was very heady, it didn't have the underneath roots. And it was only until I started working with her, I was like, oh, okay, this is so much deeper than what this level that I'm working with is. And by going through that process, I was able to start to so like bring it together for myself and starting to figure out, okay, how do these career archetypes work? And that's where that idea started to come from, which is what I work with people on is how do you find your own career archetype? So I work with it on the intellectual plane or the conscious plane, as well as how do we tap in underneath to this more unconscious zone of your own personal psyche.
Mm. I just, yeah, I'm gonna keep saying it. It's music to my soul. Everything works. But something that caught my attention when you were speaking is you've truly really made your mind your ally in this quest. And I know that many people struggle with their mind, and it's the enemy of this quest that they're actually going on. It's the enemy of their life, of their job, and their health and everything else in between. So how is your relationship with your mind, or how has it evolved over time? And do you have any practices that support your your relationship with your mind in that healthy way?
Yeah, and I struggled, I think, like everybody else, with mental chatter and all the things that come with that. I always like the idea in astrology of Mercury being neutral. And so pairing up Mercury with positive, for example, positive planet like a Jupiter or a Venus, then Mercury is going to be one of the good guys, so it's going to give good information. And pairing up Mercury with Mars uh, or a Saturn is going to give you a negative connotation potentially.
Mm-hmm.
And so always try to pair my mind with good things has potentially has helped me. Good people, good environments, good information typically will end up helping me. Going out for a walk and just thinking through things has always helped me. I can tend to overthink, so I do have to pause and pull myself back. I just am that way naturally inclined. And so, in terms of like a repeated practice, I don't have one of those for my mindset, but I can typically tell now later on as I've grown older that there's too much mental chatter on going on. I need to go for a walk. I need to go work out. I need to go
Mm-hmm.
just run until I can't think and just purely in my body. That can help.
Yeah, that works. I mean, those are tools to rely on. Like some people meditate, other people don't need to do that, or for them it's too actually aggravating to meditate, because you have to move that physical body. Um, that's one of my key aspects in my work, that there is that unique creativity, that unique aspect, that unique energy and frequency that we need to learn to dance with, to maneuver, and we all have our own unique way to do that. um and for me, I've fallen in love with the archetypes of the tarot because there's so
Mm.
many of them. I'm wondering, is there any inspiration that you've taken from them, or do you know much about the tarot and the archetypes that exist within that?
I don't know in depth. I do have a lot of people that I work with that are very, very interested. It was funny. I had a student a little while ago who was going through a transition in her workplace. And as she was leaving her job, she was also having to move houses at the same time that she was having to deal with these conversations with the parents, talking about, hey, I need to change to a different path. And the parents were annoyed about that
Mm.
or frustrated because they saw a better life or a better way of doing things in her life than she originally thought. And she said, this is just a tower moment for me. It's like I'm getting blasted at every single level and everything is just blowing up right now. And so, yeah, I do love the tarot and I do flip on occasion just to get a different perspective on things or if I
Hmm.
just feel like I'm thinking too much. But yeah, I find the symbolism in that to be awesome.
Beautiful. um yeah, there's so many threads that we could go on. I'm wondering, what is the biggest challenge that people are facing? Obviously, there's the surface level challenge of I'm stuck, I don't know which career path to take. But have you found that common theme that runs through, or that repeats itself, of, let's say, a longing to express, or a longing to live a better life, or something along those lines? Have you been able to decipher that within your community or within the work that you're doing of what it is that we are craving as people in this age?
It's a big question.
You give me the answer to life. That was the question.
I can give you, I'll give you some observations, I suppose.
Yeah.
I mean, some observations. One big one that I find really, really interesting is people will come with different problems, such as, especially for me, how do I find all my purposes? And they're constantly looking outwards. And typically it's this unawareness of self-knowledge that they're lacking pieces of themselves. They can't find these different aspects of themselves because maybe they haven't been presented with the right perspective to actually glean into that side of themselves, or because maybe at one point they have seen a part of themselves and they've shared that part of themselves and other people have seen it and said no and stomped it out of them. And so they've pulled that back and so that part of them is just thrown away. And the more that they peer into this veiled side of themselves and bring that part of them forward, the more they tend to connect into what it is that they actually want. And then what it is they actually want helps them to start moving in that direction. And there's a lot less friction or a lot less problems on walking their path. One other thing that sort of struck me was when people said that they had many different options. Oftentimes, the actual option had been discarded earlier on. Maybe it wasn't the actual path, but it was a part of their personality or a part of the way that they wanted to express that had been like thrown away. And I think I use that example of the artist where they get to the end of high school and then they're told, oh, actually, no, you can't do that. And then it will fractionate in such a way where they start thinking that they have all these different options, but they already had the option, but someone had told them that that was a no. And so they think that they have all these different options and really they already found what the actual thing was earlier on. They've thrown it away, so they're unable to, or they think they're unable to walk that path. So it's more of an act of healing as opposed to an act of finding the right one or seeking it out and becoming aware of it. So I found that really interesting, that the more self-knowledge that we gain often can lead to some form of healing or some form of awareness that allows us to get rid of a lot of life's bullshit problems and just, oh, okay, this was the actual thing. Yeah.
Yes, what comes to me is this song. It's one of the lines in it is saying, "Stop searching and find." That you're changing your energy, your vibration, your motivation, rather from a place of I need to find the answer. I'm always on this quest. I don't know, blah blah, blah to it's here. I found it. And you've mentioned as well that through working with your Sarah, was it?
The tarot.
You mentioned you had a partner that you started working with. Was it Sarah?
Oh yeah, Sarah Kay.
Yeah, that's she elevated that energetic infrastructure into the work as well. And how have you seen your work change from that point on when you had essentially both the feminine and the masculine because you had the mind and the energy and the flow and the heart?
Well said. The main thing that I saw was early on when I was doing this kind of work, and it was overly intellectual, was that I didn't actually allow myself to bring forward first the esoteric element of some of the perspectives that I use. And then the other side of it was I didn't bring forward the importance of experiential feeling. So one of the things that I'll do with students is we go through this practice where they do have to connect in and tune into it and feel out what their actual career archetype is. So we do a lot of intellectual stuff up until that point, and then it's like, okay, get rid of that stuff. Now let's tune into this deeper hum of, is this actually correct for me, deeply felt? And I would never have done that before bringing in that element and working with her. I would have just said, okay, the pattern leads to this, or we add up all these different sections and that equals this, so therefore we walk that path. And it was just missing something. It was missing this other side. And obviously we can trick ourselves if we just think about things in a conscious way. And I wanted to get rid of the trickery of that part. And so working with her allowed me to bring that undercurrent into the work. And work with her, before I worked with her, I didn't really know that was going to happen. And then it's just becomes so obvious and it becomes like a must that this part is missing. You can't really talk about archetypes without that side of things. It's kind of ridiculous to talk about them in that way without it. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's such an important piece for us to be able to feel what we're actually speaking about. Because if the two of them are disconnected, then we can intellectualize so often, like so much, to the point of like insanity. But until we actually feel it in our bodies and our hearts and our soul, like, wow, like you were saying that you were searching for so many answers and none of them gave you that like spark of this is what I'm doing. That until you found that, you felt incomplete. So I guess the enemy of that would be the distractions that you've already mentioned, that that people often discard that initial part or that initial path because they think that, or they've been told that it's not good enough. You can't follow that. So how important would you say making friends with distraction or with the negative voices or with the critic would be to following your career archetypes?
I use this term called temptation paths when I work with people.
Ooh.
And so the temptation path is essentially a path that is a natural path. And there are very good reasons for people following temptation paths. Reasons such as safety and security, reasons such as the social environment that you're in, making sure that everything is okay with that social environment and you're not going to get outcasted or this feeling of being abandoned because you pursue that path. Other reasons are that they sort of fit what you're meant to be doing. Like there's like a semi-overlap. And so therefore the career archetype, I would say, would get a little bit activated. And it's like, well, this kind of fits, therefore I can pursue it. And so these temptation paths pull us off path. And so we have to become aware enough of our actual path and connect into it on a soul level. So you mentioned the mental chatter of distraction by going underneath and connecting in with ourselves through this journey of self-knowledge so that we can easily identify these paths that are going to take us away. Because our actual path is deeply embedded within us. And so long as we're connected to it, we can discern. It's still going to unfold. It's still going to change. And there's still going to be these surprises in our path. That's not going to, never be the case. But there are going to be certain paths that are very obviously not our path if we're connected. And yet if we're not connected, it's, oh, that looks interesting. I'm just going to go follow that. And all of a sudden, we're in this path and we're like, shit, this isn't probably the right way to go.
Yeah, it's so many, like that shiny object syndrome, right? Where we keep longing for novelty and newness, where really what I found especially is finding the newness in the ordinary, in the path that we don't actually want to walk. And it feels like there's a bit of a trickery there because I might love painting, but showing up to painting might seem like a chore or something that I have to force myself to do or something. Obviously it changed over time. Now it's more like I get to show up to it and then the painting happens because it can't happen without the two components coming together. But so often I feel like we're on this chase to ease that discomfort that we feel inside, that we're longing for safety, and this new object that we're chasing is often giving us that subtle feeling of, for this moment I feel like I'm doing something, I feel like I'm experiencing something new, and therefore I don't feel that discomfort. And what you've mentioned as well is this element of safety, that we have to feel safe enough to follow this path. And so do you work at all with anything around the nervous system or reestablishing that safety?
So we talk a lot about what I call as becoming barriers. So there are these, we can call that an ideal, we can call it a higher state, we can call it a direction where you're actually able to, and I don't mean ideal in the sense of the typical traditional success where you've got the fancy car and you've got a big house and whatnot, but you'll have your own sort of definition or maybe even like a felt direction where you're going towards an ideal. And then there are these different barriers along the way where I would say that we need to overcome them, or we need to go through them depending on what the path requires us to do. And some of those barriers can look like things like safety, can look like things like the fear of success or the fear of failure or being abandoned, or the fear of judgment, putting ourselves out there in a way in the world different to how we've done it in the past. And all of a sudden, how am I going to identify myself? Will I express like this? And are people going to still love me? We have to deal with these certain things. And when it comes to pursuing our vocation, because it is public, this idea of safety is one that we have to simultaneously be like, okay, I'm safe, but at the same time, I do have to push myself out a bit. But then I have to come back out and re-solidify and then push myself out a bit. And so we've got to find like our tolerance zone around that particular barrier. Because many of the people that I work with are used to not only just being safe, but then to the point where they're stagnating so much that they're never out in the world and they're never progressing. And so we do need a bit of discomfort, but not a crazy amount so much so that we go right back and hide from our work. So it's a bit of a dance, and we do have to find our own like tolerance to it and our own level. And I do sort of stress that everybody is different, and you kind of find how far you can push yourself. But that idea of safety in extremes, I think, is something to be like very careful of, because if we're too safe, then we're never going to do anything in our vocation, because it is scary to go out there in the public and do your work. But if we're too extreme, then we might go too far and then never want to do it again, or get too much of a scar the first time. So that's the kind of way that I look at it and how I guide people towards it.
And it feels like ultimately, what kind of relationship do we have with life itself? Like, if we fail, do we feel like we're going to be held, or was it mirrored to us in in childhood or in society that it's fine to fail, it's fine to figure things out, it's fine to not know? That ultimately it boils down to, yeah, how afraid are we of what's going to happen when we not reach our goals, or when we take the wrong path, or that no one is going to be there on the other side, but we do have to step into that responsibility of being that person who will be there for us and for ourselves, right?
And like just framing it in a way that says, rather than, hey, if I put myself out there and don't get a specific outcome, then I've failed, as opposed to, hey, if you put yourself out there, that's a win. Well done. You did it. And that's enough. And that can give you momentum, and that can build in the right direction.
What's one failure that you can think of that turned into the greatest gift that you can think of?
Personally?
Yeah, sure. Personally or whatever way.
Yeah. So when I was 18, I played rugby. I played rugby since I was about 7 or 8 years old, all the way up until I was 17, 18. Was trying to go professionally, was making all the right moves in order to go professionally, had a contract and was moving forward. And then I did my knee in, and that was just this big blow. And at that point in time, big failure, horrible, it's over, and took a lot of readjustment in my identity to even start to get moving in life again. So I would have considered at that time that that was a big failure, and I didn't take care of myself properly. I didn't do the right stretches and recovery. I was just somebody that was always just like go, 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 go. And then later on in life, I'm so happy that I didn't go down that route, because it's actually the path that I wanted to go down. So that would probably be the one.
Wow. And you often hear that, of people pursuing a certain path in the career, and they get an injury, an illness, they go through a big grievance period, somebody they love passes away, and suddenly they're like, I can't see life in the same way that I've seen life before. And so through, this dark night of the soul, or through the greatest challenge that we might experience, actually we come into more of who it is that we are in this world. And I guess something that people might question or ask is like, why do we even have to go through the process? Why can't we just like be born into this world, know what we're doing, and just keep following that? And even the other day, obviously I was on Instagram, I was watching some content, and this 3-year-old child um came on the screen, and he was a painter, and he was having this gallery exhibition, and people were paying hundreds and millions and thousands for his painting, and he's a 3-year-old. And his mom was doing the interview, and she was like, yeah, it's just something that we're doing. I'm encouraging it. He seems to be enjoying it. But if he tells me that he doesn't want to do it anymore, I'm going to be like, okay, we had a great time. That was a good adventure. And, I'm you also mentioned this before in the conversation of that somewhere along the line we lost this connection to what it is that we wanted to do, or we pushed it away, or we pursued something else. So how much do you feel that the roots of what it is that we are here to do exist in our childhood, or have been there, or have sparked through as seeds?
Hmm. So there's a lot of signs, clues, different, like you get glances of it throughout your entire life. One thing that if you are interested in trying to find out what your vocation is to do is to go over your own personal biography, like go over like what has happened and pull out these different things that you're pulled towards or different sort of your own life mythology themes. What are the motives going on in your life? Do you understand your own personal story that's going on? To put into like a really practical, simple example, one thing that I'll ask people to do is just saying, what's your favorite movie and who's the favorite movie character of that movie? And one of the reasons for that is because we get drawn into these characters because they have aspects of ourselves, different traits, different expressions, sometimes different storylines that are going on that people are getting pulled towards. As an example, had somebody that she was really into Pirates of the Caribbean, really into Johnny Depp's character in that movie. And she found through the process that she just wasn't really exploring or wasn't really being vibrant or charismatic in life, and yet that was her favorite character.
Mm.
And so she ended up signing up for, I think she was signing up for a local theater and is in now a play and is now able to express that side of herself that was just not there. And so that's to give you like an understanding of, okay, you're watching a movie, you probably just think that, hey, I'm just watching this movie just because, it's interesting. And then the question is, well, why is it interesting? Why are you getting pulled
Mm.
into that? What is this saying to you? And then beginning to analyze that, you start to get new self-knowledge of who you are and what it is that you're being drawn towards, because not everybody is into Johnny Depp and Pirates of the Caribbean. So there's like a distinction going on here. And so just these little clues around the place, and another great one is in university or college or even that last year of high school, was there a particular project that you did that you really, really enjoyed? And oftentimes that particular project has clues again of the work that you're meant to be doing. I remember I had a student who was really interested in women's health, um, and it was to do with menstrual cycles. And she just got really interested in this university project. And then she ends up leaving. She ended up becoming a nurse later on, but then she ended up realizing, like, oh, I really got interested in that project. And she ended up wanting to help women with mental health and how it tied into their menstrual cycles.
Mm.
And so there are these different things that pop up all the time in our lives. And if we're attentive enough, then we get to sort of get an understanding of, oh, that's actually meant to be a part of my path. And it's not just randomly interesting or randomly fascinating.
It can be hard though, we keep hearing these voices of like, you know, move to Bali, become a yoga teacher, blah, blah. There's so many iterations of them. And you're like, no, I'm not going to drop my entire life to do this thing. But there's that's an extreme case. Like there's other ones too, like quit your job. It's not serving you.
Yeah.
You keep getting sick, you keep getting back pain, you keep getting your foot just broke from going to work, stop going to work. But we have such a resistance to it because it feels like often it's not that we're afraid to fail, and it's not that we're afraid to actually follow the path, but it seems to me that we're sometimes afraid of our own power, the and the huge capacity of how good our life can feel like. How, because it feels like when we do step into that role, when we begin to claim of I'm an artist, I'm this, I'm that, then it takes responsibility that we have to start showing up in a completely different way than how we were showing up previously in life. We can no longer just sit on our phone and scroll because there's this monkey chatter and this monkey mind of, hey, hey, go do the thing, go do the thing. It's, you have to go do the thing.
Mm. And I mean, that's one of the reasons why most people aren't walking their path, unfortunately, and they're not able to get over or get through that, or they don't have the right strategies in place, or they don't have the right support or the right guidance on how to go about it. I absolutely agree with you. I think it is the other side of things where it's the embedded power. There's the Nelson Mandela quote where he says, "Our deepest fear is not that we're inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we're powerful beyond measure. It's that we are powerful beyond measure, and being able to tap into that side is the scary part. And that is the part that we are probably resisting more than the classic, hey, just leave your job and it'll all work out." Because I mean, I've been working in this field for a long time, and that's just not how it typically happens. It happens very slowly, happens methodically. There can be ways where it works and it's chaos, and it still can work out, of course. And we've heard a lot of those stories, but typically that's like slow transitions and long term, like, hey, I'm going to go to school for a while for this thing.
Mhm.
That's the actual way that most people transition into their path. It's more of an endurance than, an overnight 30 days and all of a sudden I'm running my own successful business on Instagram. It's just social media.
Yeah, it's social media is, showing you people who are 10 years chasing their career and building the foundation and doing the inner work. Or like we, as you mentioned, we're watching the movie and all of a sudden, 2 minutes in and this person has already accomplished their dream and life goal.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But we're missing the like 20, 30, 10 years in between this moment and the next. And as you were speaking about that, I was laughing to myself because I can say that the same thing is for like video games or the books that you're attracted to as well. And I was always drawn to like the fantasy realm, and in games I would always be playing the sorceress, like a mage character. And it makes so much sense. And then my final project in college was also around the Slavic witch called Baba Yaga, and I filmed a short film around her her background and how she's this personification of nature, but also an archetype of power and feminine mystery, that she's representative of the cycles of death and rebirth that we go through. So I was just, listening to you, laughing to myself, saying, yeah, it's true. It really is true. It works. So
Yeah, it's pretty wild when you see it.
what is your favorite movie?
Yeah, so my favorite, well, it's kind of like a tie, but it's Inglorious Bastards mixed with Death Note. And both the main characters are
what a company, what a combo.
yeah.
I wasn't expecting that.
Yeah, both main characters are very much just investigators, looking at things a little bit differently. And that trait seems to be in me and trying to get to the bottom of career archetypes and people's vocations. And before I ended up guiding people to finding their own career archetype, I would do it for them. I'd say, give me all the information, I'll do it, and I'll go through all the work. And that was just very much this deep investigative process. And then later on, I'll be like, here's your career archetype. That's very similar to how those characters act and work.
Mm. And do you utilize at all different methodologies or philosophies in your work? So I know human design is very good at guiding people, informing them of what something of how they operate in the world. I love the gene keys as well. That's a beautiful methodology. But we live in such a beautiful digital age now that there's so much that we have access to. I'm wondering if yeah, if if there's something that's calling you as well.
So I have done human design, and I've just personally just my own chart. I haven't studied it deeply. I find it interesting. Someone mentioned gene keys and like you have to get into this, and I'm like, okay, at some point. Um, and then I also have
You
another
would
friend, a
love
human
it.
design reader.
It's all about contemplation. Like there's no answers. You're just contemplating.
Seems very philosophical, so that's cool. Yeah, many different perspectives. Use astrology, use Jungian psychology, use some French philosophy. Um, I look at different, I use biography, like I mentioned, life mythology. I do use some myth stuff. What else do we use? We use, like I mentioned, the becoming barriers seem to be coming up again and again. Also, social feedback, meaning that we do see value in social feedback. It's not one of these things where it's like just ignore everybody and pursue your own calling and like block your ears. That other people in your environment, your family, your friends, your peer groups, you have to navigate this. You do have to take on that feedback and understand your place in the space, which I think is really, really important. But that's just an idea of some of the perspectives that we use. And really, it's a matter of, for particular students, they'll pull from certain subjects a lot more than others. And so everybody will get their particular favorite where they'll be like, oh, this one has like a lot of juice for me, and I'm really into this one. And this one, it's got a little bit, but like this one,
But this one.
yeah. So that definitely happens as well.
And on that note of feedback, like social feedback, how would you navigate not allowing the external world to influence you so much, but also being permeable enough that you don't close yourself off into your own little ego box of I'm doing this and this is the only way?
Yeah. I think the first thing is to actually find out where you're at within the group in some form. Can you have a conversation with somebody and actually see, is my interpretation of how they're going to react, is that true? Because a lot of the times we think people are going to react in a particular way and they're not actually going to react in that way. Many of the people that I work with, I struggle with, hey, if I actually go pursue this path, then I've got to go and tell my mom and dad. And that's going to be really, really hard because they might be in a culture, maybe they are Indian or Asian, which is happens all the time where they don't want them to pursue an alternative path. And so they have an idea. And then when the reality comes to it and they actually express to their parents, like, hey, I'm thinking about a different path, there's often like actual a nice conversation that happens back and forth where it's not as bad as they thought it was in their head. And also just having, a sort of like backup questions or backup approaches. If it does go wrong, how do you work with that? So just being prepared for that if that does go awry helps. And yeah, so actually finding out, is what you think true? Is it actually going to happen in the way that you think it is? Because probably not. Probably not.
My partner, he started asking this question: is this mine? Is this thought mine? Is this emotion mine? Is this coming from something else in the environment? Because I feel, for you're going down the path of career archetypes, it seems like and especially the conversation that we're having, it feels like it's a little bit more on the um, sensitivity side, in the sense that we are a bit more open to different ideologies, to how the world works, to the cycles, to nature, and through that we can become a bit like sponges who soak up everything around us.
Yeah. And I mean, it's one of the reasons why so many people will find themselves let's say you get interested in spirituality, and then you start getting pulled in that direction or that domain. Then all of a sudden you might think, okay, because I'm into spirituality, then I can only be a yoga teacher or like a life coach, or they start like pulling out these pathways because of what they're absorbing in that environment. Whereas if they want, or if they're more, like you said, sensitive to like filtering that information, maybe there's a path within that space that nobody else is really walking at the moment that they could potentially walk. And that happens in the same with the creative space, like even in the way in which you structure a path, right? So if you have like a novelist, they might think that the only route is to go to get a publisher. And so because everybody else within that space is kind of walking like that, and yet there are so many different approaches to writing in the world and getting paid for that. That
Are
you
you
don't have to just
planning?
walk
Are
these
you planning
particular
to write a
routes.
book anytime soon around this work?
Maybe. Yes, people have asked for like archetype type book, but it's all sort of in the course, and that's kind of where I have my focus on.
I mean, it's, you know, that you can just send them the transcript of the videos and say, here you go. There's your book.
Yeah. That's a fast way to do it.
Yeah. And I'm curious, how do you see the evolution of careers and work and archetypes? Because it seems like we're in this time where there is a saturation of creativity and holistic healers and coaches and everything else. Also on the, you know, on the precipice of AI and people potentially losing more jobs and actually needing that support to find what it is that they're doing in life. But what's, you know, if you were to future cast, what do you anticipate happening, and how can we begin to address those challenges or new opportunities that are rising with this new time?
There's so many cool things that are happening. It's super interesting. I'm definitely on the optimist side of things.
Me too.
I do see. Cool. They're on the same page. With the technology side of things, I do see eventually jobs not going away. There's going to be many different kinds of jobs and different kinds of work, but the way in which we see the landscape at the moment, it's just not going to be the same. And they are going to be, probably for the first time ever, a mass collective, if I was the future cast, mass collective of people pursuing things that are higher, purpose, meaning, what is my place, moving into that sort of direction, because all of their base level needs are going to be catered by things like universal basic income. And so we have this new sort of era where people can go and pursue these different pursuits, creative pursuits, spiritual pursuits, even like community pursuits as well. Self-healing will come through stronger. And I think we're getting like a taste of it at the moment, where everybody's moving towards. So anybody sort of in these fields is really at the forefront of these fields and are pioneers, which also means that they're sort of underdeveloped, and we've got like the very, very basic version at the moment. And what we might think is really at the forefront right now in all these different fields is just, we're going to look back at it and just see it as amateur hour later on. So that's super exciting. I think the other big change in the workplace is, what I'd say is it's just women in the workplace coming into the forefront. For the first time ever, we have women en masse walking career paths of like, hey, I'm going to start a company. Hey, I'm going to be working in this organization. I'm working at the top of these organizations. And we've never had that before. So that's for good and for bad. We have got to see like both sides. But we've never had that before. So that's going to be a massive change in culture and what we're seeing at the moment. So those two things I think are like really, really strong, big cultural level shifts. And I do see the collective moving on like this upswing where things are going to get better, but there's also going to be new types of problems rather than, hey, I need to buy my house, or hey, I need to make sure that I'm fed. It's going to be like, hey, I need to go and find my meaning, which means they're going to be led down these channels of who can help me find this kind of meaning that this robot clearly can't, because for whatever reasons, I don't think we're going to be able to trust, like Chat GPT or something like that with like, how do I find my purpose in life? It's just not going to give us that oomph that we need, that internal inner conviction.
Yeah, there's no amount of data it feels that we can input to AI to tell us, hey, what it is that I'm doing in life. Tell me. It feels like it's stimulating that mind that you were talking about, and you're still needing that energetic grounding and that energetic infrastructure to lean on, so that it's not just the mind and trying to process information, because AI is a processing machine. Like it's, it can tell you all the answers. It can probably give you free therapy if you're intelligent enough to ask the right questions or open enough. But um it's I feel like a lot of people are going to be afraid of this transition because they're clinging to an identity that feels safe to them and that has been sold to them as the way, that working this job or having this career is going to be the forever happy place that is going to be here forever. But as it's being presented to us now, um it might not be so. That it feels like there's a collective resonance and an upheaval that's subtly happening. Well, subtly, not subtly, depending on where you are, and that's generating this perhaps anxiety within people of, I need to work even more. I need to be even more present in my job, like in order to secure a future for myself, because it's unpredictable. But of course, the more we push, the more we're going to get slingshotted back to that zero spot and might have to like recover in the process of selling our soul.
Yeah, yeah. I definitely feel the anxiety as well through just talking with other people, and other people are definitely worried. I mean, I get it. When I left my insurance gig, I tried to bring forward the Monday to Friday structure. Like I took that structure and tried to do it in business and walking my own personal path. And it took me a long time to realize, like, hey, you don't actually need to do it like Monday to Friday in that way. You don't have to wake up at these particular times. You don't have to work on certain times. And just that realization of how, oh, I took an old structure and tried to just put it on the new thing, and it still didn't quite work, was enough to sort of spark an insight into, okay, something needs to change, something needs to be different. So I hope that in the future people will have that same realization, because I do think they'll still take old structures and still try to put them onto the future, and that they'll just break down because they're no longer going to work with what's happening at that time.
Exactly, like inevitably, like whatever path we're following, if we get to that place where things are not working, then it's a sure way of, hey, this is not the right way. So there's like a really beautiful blessing in this, where life will somehow figure out, or universe or God or source, whatever it is that you believe in, will will bring you to that point, even if you take the wrong path of, hey, that's the wrong way. Let's give you the
Yeah,
tower moment.
yeah, yeah.
And yeah, for the people who would be afraid or would be anxious about this transition, um, what would be some words of wisdom that you would offer to them to help them find their path, or help them soothe that agitation within?
I think just that it's normal that anybody that's going through some sort of transformation is going to feel that way. I know that sometimes it can come out and people can talk about transformation in this light of awe and happiness and lightness, but transformations are dirty and they're gritty, and they have tears and they have anxiety and they have frustrations, and that's often how they appear. And so if you're going through that, then that's sort of normal. And the main thing is to keep walking. It's like if you got one of those fire walks, you don't want to walk halfway and then walk backwards, because then it's just like you just got burned for nothing. You want to walk all the way to the other side, and then that's the way to go through it. So just to keep going, it does get better, and there's a reason why people talk about transformation in such a
It
light.
does get better. It gets so much better.
That's what I would say.
Yeah, yeah, it's true. Beautiful. And there's one more question that was rummaging around in my mind, but I got lost somewhere. Let me see. Yeah, it feel once again, there's so much esoteric knowledge, or so much spirituality that is being infused in these spaces and in these conversations. And it feels like that we're at this time where obviously when so much, like you're talking about the shift from masculine to feminine, but it also feels like we went from hyper religion to hyper spirituality really quickly. And now perhaps people are finding their own way of understanding the world, of understanding the universe, of understanding God. And for someone who is very intellectual, it feels that this path is incredibly difficult because it's so much of it is calling for a soothing of the mind, a surrendering of the mind, and an opening to something that is within you. So it feels like there's this journey that's happening both internally and externally, and we can't just get there through the mind. So what is the medicine that you could offer to someone who's, struggling with this concept of trusting that there's something benevolent or good in the universe, or that there's something deeper, like a sort of magic in the world, and the people that are perhaps stuck in the mind of trying to figure it out, like A, B, C, D leads to D.
Yeah, yeah. A couple of thoughts come to mind. The first one is the two routes of this is there's two routes of spirituality, but this isn't the only route to spirituality, just to help express this idea. So there's the mystic route, and then there's the occult route. And the mystic route is one of surrender, release, pure faith, just letting go. And then there's the occult route, which is very much theoretical, heavy intellectual practice, constant, repetitive exercises that go through certain things in order to open you up to that space. And so the first thing that came to my mind was sometimes people are just more naturally geared towards one of these directions. Some people are more geared towards the mystic route, where by just releasing, they're able to just find things and things happen for them. And then some other people are more geared towards this, more intellectual, have to go at it. I think one of the issues that happens is when you have someone whose path is more of a mystic path, but they're more geared towards this other side. And that's, I think, was the release that you're sort of referring to, or they're having to like let go in order to enter that mystic type pathway. And if that is you, then it will be very, very hard because you will have to let go of all of your intellectual like scaffolding that you're holding on to and
gripping.
yeah, clinging on to. Yeah. And then there's some people that are meant to walk down that other path, which is one where they do have to go through the exercise for years and years and years, and then later on they do glean into some of the mysteries of the mystic path. Their path tends to be more earth-based, a little bit more grounded in the material. And that's the first that came to mind. And the other thought was that I do see a lot of intellectual struggle with these sort of like leaps of faith. And Kierkegaard, the philosopher, talks about this having to leap and having to let go. And at some point, you just reach an end point where you're just like, okay, this isn't going to be worked out through the mind, and I have to take a leap. So if you are someone that is intellectual, you do have to, if you're open to it, you do have to put yourself into different positions where you can take those leaps. And I don't think enough intellectuals do put themselves into those positions where they could take those leaps. And yeah, luckily for me, I took some leaps and landed.
And you're enjoying your life.
Yeah.
No, that's a beautiful answer, because it's offering a balm to someone who is struggling and who's thinking that following the spiritual path, they have to completely, become this eerie fairy like shaman in the woods, and completely like ditch their intellect. That within spirituality, or this loose term of spirituality, that there's still space for that mind and for that intellect to thrive. And so would you consider yourself more on the occultist side rather than the mystical? Yeah. I'm For me, it's the opposite, I would say. I'm a mystic, but I do have a fond heart for the more structured way of following the path. So I found oftentimes that yes, even though there's this mystical and you can get lost in the world and how beautiful it is and chaotic and flowing between so many different things, but when you don't have the roots and when you don't have the grounding, like something that could be offered from an occultist perspective, then you keep just floating over here and nothing happens. So to me it feels like almost like a combination of both of them together, and learning to know what it is that you need in your life. And specifically for me, like working with, let's say, Kundalini yoga, that's a practice where you have to literally sit here for 3 minutes and breathe and meet your own resistance. And it's not something that's super esoteric, like I'm gonna ecstatic dance on a Tuesday and and that's all I'm gonna do, because if I just do that, then I'm missing something deeper, something that holds the container of that chaos and that mystery.
Yeah, as you were saying that, I got reminded of the pathways and the chakra system, and obviously one goes vertically and one goes like up and down, and when it goes upwards or it ascends, they talk about it as liberation, whereas when it goes down, they talk about it as manifestation. And there's no sort of right or
I didn't
wrong
know
for these
that.
two.
That's a cool fact.
So
Thank you.
yeah, so bringing it down. You're welcome. Yeah, bringing it down to ground and or taking it up into the atmosphere. It's just dependent on your own personal path and what it is that you're trying to do in this lifetime. You're destined to be in this lifetime, as opposed to it being, right or wrong. Because I definitely see as well so much benefit from structure, especially for people that are hyper creative or into the spiritual spaces, because they want to bring in that chaos into
Mhm.
whatever it is that they work with. And so you have to find the right containers in order to hold the type of chaos that you're bringing in.
Absolutely. We're gonna wrap up soon to honor both our timelines, but I'm curious about, you know, not everyone's ready for this type of path. Not everyone's ready to transition in their career or ready to pick up a course or invest in someone on the internet, and mm, yeah, to fully trust this journey or to fully commit to it. So I'm wondering, is there any text or resources or books that you have found significant on your path, or podcasts that have really nourished you and empowered you to see life in a different way, or to follow more of this journey?
Hmm. I love Mastery by Robert Greene. I find that that's really, really practical and grounded and talks about things like the 10 dark years of how long the endurance of an actual coming to a vocation is. And it also gives so many different pathways for people, as opposed to, hey, just pick one thing and then do that for 10,000 hours. And then you end up reaching mastery in your career, which is one of many approaches. So I found that really, really useful as like a resource. And that's something I'll definitely recommend.
Wow. Yeah, I'm gonna add that to my reading list, which is ever ever extending, never finishing. Um, but yeah, thank you so much for this conversation today, and I'm so excited to keep witnessing your work in the online space and how it's evolving. It's whenever I see you on my feed, it's always like a breath of fresh air, because I feel like we're in such a time of oversaturation and everyone's a healer, everyone's a coach, but it feels like there's a regurgitation of information, that everyone's saying the same thing, and it's all about 10x this, 10x that, why you're not attracting your ideal clients, and it feels yucky to me. But whenever I see your content, it's like a breath of fresh air of like, ah, there's something new. I'm excited. I'm leaning towards this because it's not something I've heard before from 50 other people. So
Well,
thank you for
I
that.
appreciate
And I'm wondering, any last words that you would like to share?
No, I think, yeah, actually,
Go.
I would just say, I would say that people, that if you're thinking about your vocation, if you're thinking about your path, I think the very first hurdle is it even possible? And just know that it is possible. It is real to walk a path where you're actually deeply aligned with your calling, and just to open yourself up to that possibility. I think it's the beginning. So if you are in that state of like, yeah, but I still have to pay the bills, or like, yeah, but this life just isn't for me, it's for somebody else, just opening yourself up to that possibility of a shit ton.
Even beginning to play with, oh, I can have a different life. And it can be exciting, and I can be invigorated, and I can be alive, and it can be ecstatic. It doesn't have to be boring or dull or exhausting. That's such a paradigm shift already. Thank you so much for that, and thank you so much for this conversation. Um, I hope that it inspires a lot of people to find, yeah, to find their own way through life, and to believe that it's possible. So if people want to know more about you, where can they find you?
Well, first off, thanks for having me. I do appreciate you holding the space and being able to talk about this. In terms of finding me at the Career Archetypes on YouTube, Substack, Instagram, and you'll find everything you need to via links on those social pages.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much.